Hey folks, today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make homemade buttermilk biscuits. You're going to need some salt, you're going to need some baking soda, and baking powder. I know some recipes only call for baking powder, but I use baking powder and baking soda. You're also going to need some ground cinnamon. So make sure you have all four of those ingredients: salt, baking soda, baking powder, and ground cinnamon. You're going to need some flour, and no, we are not going to be using self-rising flour. I believe self-rising flour already has baking soda and baking powder in it. So I would only use self-rising flour if you don't have baking soda and baking powder. You're going to need some buttermilk. You're going to need some butter. And honey is totally optional. Some people don't like sweet biscuits. Some people don't like honey at all. So if you don't want your biscuits to have a honey flavor to them, you don't have to use the honey. What we're going to do is we're going to place the buttermilk and the butter in the freezer for 25 to 30 minutes because all of the ingredients have to be almost freezing cold. Okay, when you're making biscuits, you have to make sure that the butter and the milk is freezing cold. Make sure you guys remember that. So we're going to sit them in the freezer for 25 to 30 minutes. We're going to get our bowl now. And we're going to add our all-purpose flour to the bowl. That's 2 cups. Okay? Not a cup and a half, not a cup and 3/4. 2 cups. We're going to add our baking powder. And we're going to be adding 2 teaspoons of baking powder to the bowl of flour. And what that does is that helps your biscuits rise. That rises your biscuits. If you don't use baking powder and baking soda, they're not going to rise very high. Okay, you're going to be left with flat biscuits, and we don't want no flat biscuits. We want our biscuits to be nice and fluffy and tall. Okay, we want them to swell up and puff up. You're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt as well. Give it a little taste. And here we have our baking soda. We're going to add baking soda. And you're going to only add about a 1/2 teaspoon, I'll say. About a 1/2 teaspoon. That's usually about the amount that I use. 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And that's also going to assist the baking powder and rising our biscuits. Going to make it rise. So it's going to assist the baking powder in doing that. And we're going to add some ground cinnamon. Now I know you probably don't see cinnamon in a lot of biscuit recipes, but that's the way my family made it. So I'm just sticking to what I know. And we used 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Cinnamon is very, very strong. And if you add too much, it'll overpower the biscuit taste and leave you with some cinnamon tasting biscuits. Have your biscuits tasting like cinnamon rolls. We don't want our biscuits tasting like cinnamon. It just kind of adds some flavor to the biscuits, but you don't really taste the cinnamon. Okay, just add some flavor to it. Going to give that a stir, and I recommend that you stir this in for about 3 minutes. If you look really closely, you might see little balls of baking powder. You want to make sure that that's evenly distributed into the flour along with the other ingredients. So just press down like I'm doing there. Press down on the baking powder if you can see it, and make sure that you continue to stir that in with the flour and the other ingredients. Okay? You want to get that baking powder all in there, all in and around there. We're going to get our butter now. It should be really, really cold. And you're going to be using 8 tablespoons of butter. And if you have a stick of butter, you can just use like 3/4 of the stick of butter. Okay. So there's our 8 tablespoons of butter. And we're going to press the butter into the flour. And you're going to continue to press it into the flour until it's well blended. You should be left with a bowl full of crumbs pretty much. That's all you should see is crumbs. Got to make sure you press all that butter into the flour. You shouldn't be left with anything looking like flour. It should look like a bunch of crumbs. All of it should look like crumbs, like there. See how it looked there? That's the way you want it to look. A bowl full of crumbs. Okay? So, the way my people did it was they pushed the crumbs to the sides of the bowl, and they created a space in the middle. Like that there. Create some space in the middle. And that's where we're going to pour our cold buttermilk. Our buttermilk should be really, really cold at this point. And I'm only going to be using, I don't use a lot of buttermilk like some people do. I only use about half a cup at first. I only use about a half a cup, and then we're going to slowly combine the crumbed flour with the buttermilk. Okay, you don't want to be too rough with this. When you're making biscuits, you have to be extremely cautious with how roughly you handle the batter. You don't want to handle it too much. You want to mix it in until you create a big ball of dough like that. At this time, you're going to preheat your oven to 450 degrees, and you're going to get a cutting board or any flat surface, and you're going to sprinkle some flour on a flat surface. You can use your counter if it's clean, okay? But I'm going to use my cutting board. That's the flat surface I'm going to use. I'm going to sprinkle some flour on it, and then I'm going to place my big ball of dough on that flat surface with that flour, okay? There goes my dough. I'm going to place it on that surface. Like I said, you don't want to handle this dough too many times. So you don't want to fold it or flip it or do too much to it, because it's going to ruin your biscuits. You're going to remove the gluten by doing that, and you're going to be left with really, really hard biscuits. So as you can see, I pressed it down one time. I folded it, and then I turned it on to the other side, and I'm pressing it down again. Okay. Pressing it down again. And I'm going to fold it one last time and press it one last time. Okay. And that's the way you want it to look. Now, I don't have a biscuit cutter, so I just kind of use my hands and create biscuit shapes with my hands. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. And as you can see, I'm going to create a biscuit shape like that. You want it to be about a 1/2 inch tall and about 3 inches wide. So that's my biscuit shape. And I'm going to get a baking pan, and I'm going to place the dough in the baking pan. It's not biscuits yet, guys. They biscuits when they come out. They ain't biscuits yet. Okay. And I don't know if they have to be close or far apart. Mine sometimes stick to each other. So, you know, just put them in there. They don't have to be far apart. So I'm making another one. Making a biscuit shape with that dough. Using my hands. Because back in the day, we ain't had no tools. We did everything with our hands, right? So, there are my biscuits. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the butter, and that's going to help it brown. Now, you can add a little bit of buttermilk. If you have a brush, you can brush some buttermilk on the top, but I like to add the butter. Okay, the butter give it additional flavor, and I think it helps the biscuits brown quicker than the butter does. Okay, so I'm going to spread the butter on top. I want my biscuits to be nice and brown and nice and golden brown. Some people do like to add cooking spray to the pan before adding the biscuits, but I don't do that. So what you're going to do is you're going to bake these for about 15 minutes in the oven, and then you're going to put them in the broiler at the bottom for about 2 minutes. 2 to 3 minutes. And it should come out looking like that. I don't leave them in the oven too long because sometimes it take a really, really long time for them to brown for some reason. So after about 15 minutes in the oven, I just put them in the broiler. That'll get them brown really, really quick after they're done. And I'm going to add some honey. Like I said, this part is totally optional. If you don't like honey, I just recommend that you add more butter to the top of the biscuits. But I like to add honey. But look at those homemade buttermilk biscuits. Look at them, nice and golden brown, and they're very buttery because of the butter that I added earlier. So if they had that yellow look to them, that's the reason why. That's that butter got all up in it. Guys, they were absolutely delicious. Absolutely delicious. That's how you make buttermilk biscuits, guys. Look at that, with the honey on top. Guys, these were delicious. I gave this to a few of my friends. I let a few of my friends try it out, and they was like, Jay, easily the best biscuits I ever had. I was so happy. Look at it. And let me show you how tender it is. Look at that. Look at this. Look at this. Look how easy it break apart. You could tell it's tender. Look at that. Look at that. It was super, super tender, guys. I promise you. If you do everything exactly the way I tell you to do it, you will see that these biscuits come out extremely tender. Very tender. That's why I only bake them for 15 minutes. That's how your biscuits come out tender. If they come out hard, it's probably because you folded it too much. You folded the batter too much. Or it's because you cooked them too long. As long as you don't cook them too long, you don't fold it, the batter too many times, fold that dough too many times, it should be fine. But I hope you guys enjoy this recipe. That's homemade buttermilk biscuits. Nice and tender too. They were delicious. Peace.